Junta. Let's see. Um, so, like Britannia that I just recently did, Junta is a game which has been re-released a number of times. I don't know how I can speak to it about the components, any rules changes or anything. I've not seen any of the newer versions. So this is all I've got. But it's one of those classic games from my era when there was a lot of good stuff going on. And this is a particularly fun game. It's one that I can only think of one other game that really kind of hits the same flavor and feel of comedy and positioning and trying to siphon money out of a place in this way, in the same silly sort of manner. Now obviously Lords of the Sierra Madre has the same siphon money out and try to get it out before the revolution happens. But the other game, the game that kind of collects the same kind of spirit of a game is Panther Games. Oh, where is it? I gotta kick it around somewhere here before World War II. Shanghai Trader, it's down here. I did a video of that. It's nowhere near as good a game. But it's interesting, and I wanted to have a copy, and I was willing to pay way too much for it. Just because I like to collect things, I guess. This is a game I've certainly seen my amount of playing of. In fact, a lot of, at least a couple of the West End games really did a good job for me. I mean, Paranoia, obviously, right? But Tales of the Arabian Nights is an old West End game. West End got a hold of Cosmic Encounter for a little while. I don't know where. My copy says Eon, but I think it was actually published in conjunction with West End. Druid, Richard Berg's Druid, is a very good game. Came out by West End. Some of them, Aircav was one I wanted to look at, but one of the things about West End that kind of got to me was the garish colors, which you can see in this. This board is ugly, although I've seen there's an uglier board in play. The glossy, kind of soft counters that really, really lose their... they start rubbing off very, very fast. Much faster than some of the others. And they tended, for their war games, why I stayed away from Aircraft maybe, is that they had side-mounted counters, which are a pain in the ass to cut. And just a number of factors like that I was like, well, I'm not that interested in it, even though I like some of the things about them. But I kind of regret not having picked it up back in the day, and I may well pick it up sometime now. Were they hit and miss? I don't know. I can't really think of anything West End that I played and that I didn't like. Interestingly enough. Anyway, what about this one? Well, this one has been a classic throughout my life. When I first got it, I said, wow, this is so cool. And then when I actually got to play it with people, as opposed to solo, as I do now, when I was back in my teens, I was also largely solo after my role-playing group broke up, and before it formed. For a good deal of time, 18 years of my life, I was in Buffalo and tended to have friends, especially on the early end of it, that I could game with a lot. And something like this was really easy. You could bring it to any kind of group at all. It isn't that long. It depends on the, playing with the expansion, it takes less time because people can draw more cards. Sometimes it tended to drag a little bit playing the basic game, especially if people are throwing coups all the time. There's this funny balance, though, which is, I've alluded to it a number of times during the playthrough, which is that when you first start playing the game, or if you're a new player in a group, sometimes it feels like, I can't get ahead, I'm just going to, keep throwing coups and maybe I'll get lucky. Well, you never get lucky because the game only supports a certain pace of coups, and it's something like every other turn. But as you get more and more familiar with it, and all the players kind of understand, they get this idea of what is permissible, what works in deals, and what is just going to piss everyone off, and you're just not going to get away with anything as the president. You're not going to be able to go to the bank. You're not going to, if you're taking more than you're giving to other players, you're not going to come away good. So what generally ends up happening is what we saw in, eventually among players, is what we saw in this solitaire game, which is that everybody kind of comes to an understanding that yes, you're going to deal out the money. Now, of course, I used to play the insane presidente who would hand out all the money and sometimes put it all on one person, and people just had no idea what to do about that when I was doing that at first. And then finally they figured out how to kind of cope with that, and they reined me in and forced me to sort of play the more conservative game. But you know, if I could find somebody with a lot of votes who was kind of new to the game, tagging them with a big load of money, and I take just a little less, and then finding the next turn and tagging someone with a decent more money than I'm taking, and I take a little less, I was able to win a number of games with that kind of subterfuge going on. But as people got used to it, you know, they realize and kind of start counting, how much are you putting away? How much are you putting away? And especially when you have people who can see, like with the expansion, who can see some of your money cards, well, you know, it's harder to hide the situation. I don't know whether or not the expansion adds to the game. Although, again, another thing I mentioned, I'm not really sure that I like the 7-player game without the expansion. And here's why. One person gets stuck with the Admiral all game long. It's just this horrible position, and their only desire is to start lobbing shells. In this, with the expansion, the weakest position, the position you can give to people who you don't trust, well, there's a couple of them. One's the farm and labor, which gives them a pile of votes and makes them kind of scary powerful. Another is the Minister of War, who has this ability to bonus someone else and may be able to instigate a coup that way. Now, the game we saw had only one coup. I've never seen one go through without a coup. But I think 1 or 2 is where we started settling down, round 2. And in a way, the game gets kind of boring if it's all just negotiation and assassination. It's funny and it's fun, but it's also fun to get that military out. And that's one of the great things about this game, at that sort of perfect level where you haven't reached that stasis of fully sort of, and maybe some groups never do, of fully sort of coming to an agreement of how things will be done at your table. And everybody kind of accepts it, you know? And it just, anger doesn't flare, nobody feels completely left out. They feel like they have a chance, or they can't hit the person with the big bankroll in the Swiss bank account, so it doesn't really matter whether or not they throw a coup, and they'd rather work together to try to build up prosperity amongst the other players. Once you come to that kind of understanding, well, the game kind of loses something. There was something really good about those rollicking days where, you know, well, with the insane presidente. Anyway, when played until it's kind of overplayed and overstayed its welcome, and then it becomes, you know, kind of this, more of a game that you're remembering having been a lot of fun than one that really is giving you that same silliness and coming down to these coups. And the coups are so exciting, though, because at the very end of it, it becomes this sort of free-for-all to grab territories, and you never know how it's going to land. You know, deals and agreements that were kind of made and are usually sort of nebulous, well, they break apart when you're sitting there and saying, I don't know if that guy is going to vote pro-junta or not. I want more power to decide which way we go. And then sometimes just these unimportant shootouts between two people who are both, say, pro-junta, ends up causing some bad blood, which carries on into the junta election itself, and you have one of them getting shot by the other, or some kind of deal made to shoot one for no good reason within the game except for the fact that they screwed up, and attacked each other in the midst of the junta. Or it's possible that you hand the president a victory when two pro-junta players wipe each other out on one location. So there's a lot of this kind of fun Mexican standoff type feel to this whole thing. There's also, this guesswork with who's where, who do I shoot, who's taking a chance where. None of that can be taken too seriously, and that's one of the things with the game is once it gets too sort of static, too pat, it almost starts feeling like more of a serious game than it should have been. What's really great about it is you have all this fun of the elections, you have the assassinations, you have this hidden play mechanism, and then you have this little tiny simplified kind of war game type thing going on here with buckets of dice and everything, all kind of pure AT type war game-ish thing. And it all works out, into this kind of exciting mix where you're playing several different kinds of games all at once, in different stages of the turn. And that's part of what makes it really cool, is that it's all broken up into these, very different styles of things. You're not just sitting there, kind of trying to count cubes, and you're not just sitting there making negotiations and hidden moves or something like that. You've just got so many different, fun little breaks in how the action falls out and how it's played out, that it really is an enjoyable experience, especially the first couple times you're playing it, I think. Unless you're getting hosed on those first couple times, and that can probably be pretty frustrating. Component-wise, well, like I said, the map is a pretty garish experience, and there's worse in this. The rules are not terribly pleasant. They're fun to read, but they're written in that West End style and the Costikian style, which is humorous, but it's tough to approach and find things that you need in it. It's not organized in, the SPI style, which is really helpful to me. And similarly, the Space Gamer version edition of expansion or whatever is kind of cute. I think this was the Space Gamer, or one of them that I have talks about. Well, I don't have this one. It talks about people playing out the battle, the coups in this, using Squad Leader for this system, not Advanced Squad Leader, but original Squad Leader. The cards were a simple sheet of tear 'em off type things, nowhere near today's production quality, hard to shuffle, and getting kind of old with the weather and kind of soggy. Same thing with the money. But this is a sign of how much I got to play this game, and with others even, is how worn this edition really is. And to me, that's kind of odd. There aren't many games that I got to. The counters, of course, they have a mushiness to them that they always had, and then the glossy surface really wears out easily. West End was particularly bad at that. And of course, my box has been mauled as well. This was a game that got carried around a lot. But overall, it's really cool that there are still reprints of this every now and then. I don't know if it's in print right now. But I don't think it's going to be a game that just completely fades away. I think, at least for a while, I think there's still the kind of gamer who's really into this kind of gaming experience and the kind of silliness that's involved in it, as well as there is still a lot of negotiation. There's the guesswork aspect, sure, but there's negotiation, there's strategy, and a lot of things that fit together in with that fun time that make it really good. And there isn't a lot of decision-making situations where you really got to think and look at everything and understand everything on the board. You really don't. The only part that kind of gets tricky maybe is right at the end. Hey, you know, which one of these buildings do I need in a coup, and how many of them? But, you know, when it comes down to it, you grab what you can, you know. And if somebody's willing to be peaceful, you immediately distrust them because they're probably pro-president. And therefore they will foil your plans to perhaps go pro-president because they go before you or something. I don't know. You know, but it really puts you in a lot of these kind of negotiation dilemmas where somebody can offer you a few bucks under the table or whatever in exchange for some kind of deal. Right at the end of my game, we saw 3 of the players decided, hey, let's just take all the money and run, man. See if any of us make it across the border. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fun, too. All right.